187 countries demanded the United States to end the blockade policy against Cuba that it has maintained for more than 6 decades. Our special envoy to the United Nations, Aiza Garcia, has the details.
For the
32nd consecutive time, the international community demanded today that the United States put an end to the economic, financial, and commercial blockade imposed on Cuba in 1962.
The result of the vote is as follows. With 187 votes in favor, the draft resolution is approved.
Shortly before the vote, from the highest tribune of the United Nations, the Cuban foreign minister warned about the permanent reinforcement of the siege policy against the island and its most recent impact.
The primary cause of the failure of the national electricity system was the lack of fuel that affected generation and caused instability associated with the precarious state of our plants, both direct consequences of the extreme measures of economic warfare applied by the United States government since 2019, specifically designed to prevent supplies of fuel and of parts and pieces for technical maintenance to our plants and electrical installations, as well as to hinder investment and access to financing.
Rodriguez denounced the extraterritorial nature of unilateral coercive measures.
In 1 year alone, the previous United States government sanctioned 53 vessels and 27 companies associated with shipments to Cuba.
He emphasized that for more than 6 decades, Cuba has been the victim of the most unjust, severe, and prolonged system of sanctions ever applied against any country.
The blockade against Cuba is an economic, financial, and commercial war and qualifies as a crime of genocide.
The Cuban diplomat stated that more than 80% of the current population has only known a blockaded Cuba.
No country, even those with economies much more robust than Cuba's, could face such a brutal, asymmetric, and extended aggression over time, without a considerable cost to the standard of living of its population.
He further stated that the blockade is an act of economic warfare in times of peace.
It would be impossible to ignore that the extreme hardening of the blockade is the main reason that has led a significant number of young Cubans to bet on transitory or permanent ways of personal fulfillment outside the island, which has a lacerating impact on families and the homeland.
In his speech to the international community, the Minister of Foreign Affairs exemplified how sanctions affect any Cuban family.
With $12 million, Cuba could acquire the insulin necessary for all our diabetics. In a single day, the blockade causes losses of more than that amount.
More than 50 countries took the opportunity to speak on the podium to call for an immediate end to the siege, which they described as anachronistic, immoral, and inhumane.
From the harshness of this collective punishment and the serious consequences of its free development, the Cuban people resist facing privations that no nation deserves to endure.
Colombia knows firsthand that far from supporting terrorism, Cuba has worked tirelessly in the search for peace and overcoming the armed conflict in my country.
Solidarity groups came to celebrate Cuba's victory at the United Nations. It was the United States and Israel who opposed the resolution condemning the U.S. blockade against the island of Cuba, while Moldova abstained.
Aiza Garcia, teleSUR, Naciones Unidas, Nueva York.